I'm ready to demonstrate an American Flyer compatible wheel puller. One thing I probably misstated earlier. This one, I'm fairly certain I purchased from an eBay seller. This one, which is a little bit more robust and has greater distance and width to accommodate things like Lionel drivers, I purchased from Portlands, I'm pretty sure. But just go to portlands.com and see what they have, see what he has. Now I've inserted the lifts on the mechanism that accommodate steam drivers, and you'll notice when compared to the lifts for a diesel driver that the surface area is less, meaning that there's greater setback on the one that's needed for steam. These are used for diesel. So I've got the right ones on there. Now you may have to get resourceful because I have had experiences where I cannot get the plates, the lift plates, underneath the wheel between it and the chassis simply because the wheel is just such a tight fit. I've resorted to things like taking the plates off, tapping them into the wheel with a hobby hammer, and then attaching the mechanism to the outside of the lifts. Let me see if I can get it in. I have it started, but this one might be a little easier because the wheel is already loose. So I got the lifts on opposite sides underneath the wheel. Again, you may have to get a little resourceful and just keep tinkering with it until you get it started underneath the wheel. Place it such that the pin is directly above the axle. Twist the pin down to touch the axle squarely. And then you should be able to start it lifting. Now I'm going to use the key in this case. And most of the times I need it. I'm simply going to turn the key. The pin pushes down on the axle. The plates pull up on the wheel as opposing forces. And it extracts the wheel. This was a good opportunity to clean behind the wheel on the chassis, and there was some excess oil there. I also cleaned the axle as well as I could, as much as it would protrude, and that's the results on this wipe, which is just 91% isopropyl alcohol on a coarse paper towel. I took the opportunity to clean the inside of the wheel structure as well as the outside. I'll polish the rim once it's back into place. I use Q-tips to go inside the wheel opening to remove excess oil. And I even used some contact cleaner to go inside the bushing from the outside and from the inside while I had it with a little bit better access. Now it's going to have to be re-lubricated, but I'm going to wait. My practice is to wait and lubricate the bushing once the wheel is in place. I don't want to take a risk of any kind of lubrication sliding down that axle while I'm pushing this on, thus compromising its contact and close contact with the axle and being able to stay on. Now, in order to begin the process of quartering the wheel on the far side, which is where it's missing, I had to put the side rod on the opposite side. And I need to put the side rod on with both nuts. Don't need the center one, but do need them on the outside drivers. And they need to be tightened all the way down to minimize any movement. Now, I've stated earlier that the root cause of this problem, I believe, was the wheels sliding in and out freely on the axle. Another common problem is they rotate freely on the axles like that, or the rim rotates freely on the wheel, or the rim moves in and out on the wheel. All four of those can cause these similar results. But I should have said the root cause is not the wheel moving in and out on the axle. The root cause was over lubrication with a very thin, low viscosity oil that penetrated not only through the bushing, but out the side of the wheel and into the wheel at the axle that caused it to come off, I believe. So that's the root cause, is over lubrication with a low viscosity oil. I'm ready to begin the installation of the last flanged wheel, the one that was falling off, onto the chassis. What I've done on this side, the side that it is not going to be installed on, is to go ahead and install the side rod with the nuts fully tightened in an operational position. Then I line the side rod up with the axle ends, especially on this wheel, the flangeless stud wheel, and then the back driver wheel that has the geared axle. And I make sure that the side rod passes over those. Now, what I'm doing doesn't require, I don't believe, a quartering tool. I have not used a quartering tool yet, mainly because every steam locomotive I've ever worked on, I never remove the stud flangeless wheels, and they maintain their quarter relationship with one another, and then I work off of that, using that in the side rods. If all 6 wheels were removed, yes, definitely would need a quartering tool. I then tape it down with a pretty strong masking tape, just so it won't wiggle as I'm trying to put on the wheel on the other side. Now on the other side, I've already hand pressed the wheel on, and simply use the eye test to align the stud with the hole on the wheel that I'm about to replace. And now we're ready to take it over to the vice grip. Prior to placing it on the vice grip, I have to remove the side rod and the 2 nuts on the far side. That's because the vice grip, the vice arms are going to press against the wheels, and I need them pressing against the center of the wheels without any interference with the side rod or the nut that goes on. You just have to treat it very gingerly to make sure you don't knock this wheel off accidentally. If you do knock it off accidentally, you just have to go through the process again. Put the side rod back on, put the tape on, use the eye test to align it to make sure that the quartering is probably still there, and then take it to the vice grip. I have the chassis positioned in the Irwin cast vice grip, ready to press the wheels on. Now it's a little bit different if you're pressing the wheels on the geared axle versus the non-geared front axle. You've got a little bit of interference with the motor mount up here where the armature is mounted, whereas here you don't have that, so you can maybe center it a little bit differently. It's very important to get as much of the wheel down inside of the grip as you can, as close to the center axle of the grip as you can, although with these that have 3 posts coming out of them, they're pretty sturdy on the tips and maintain that 90-degree relationship. But we can straighten out any wobble if we have any at all later. So it's ready to be pressed. You can see it's free. I can move it back and forth. So it's pressing, should have equal pressure on both the wheels. And I'm simply going to start the process by turning the grip, the vise, and then I'm going to stop and just check with a dime. I'm going to check the gauge. As a matter of fact, a lot of times I'll just hold the dime in there, and when I see the dime is not moving anymore, then I may back off just a little bit using the wheel puller. It's still sliding up and down and moving right and left just a little bit. Tighten it up just a little bit more. Still moves up and down freely. Seems to be a little tighter. It's probably time for it to check it. So now I'm going to release the grip. So the ends of the axles look like they're in about the right position as far as depth. Going to double check the gauge one more time by putting the dime in. Moves back and forth. Axle moves just a little bit right and left. It's probably okay. Check it against the front. Front seems to be a little tighter on its gauge, although the dime passes between it and moves slightly. The gear on the geared axle seems to be fairly centered. I am going to put it back in for just maybe one more turn. Excuse me. With a slight press. It's a little bit of pressure, additional pressure. Check movement. This looks good. Check the gauge with the dime. Looks good. We should be good to go. Now at this point what I do is I usually test the wobble to see if there is any. Doesn't appear to be any. Doesn't appear to be any on this one either. Now is the time when I'll start the lubrication.